Donald Trump finally arrived in Switzerland today for the World Economic Forum after his second attempt. And right away, he caused a loud scandal, throwing insults at world leaders and claiming that Europe is nothing without the United States. In his speech, Trump mainly discussed Greenland, the Peace Council, and Europe. But he still managed to lash out with criticism at the presidents of Ukraine and Russia, Zelensky and Putin, calling both of them, quote, stupid. A Trump-Zelensky meeting is set for January 22, and Trump's envoys Stephen Vitkov and Jared Kushner are urgently heading to Moscow. Vitkov, by the way, stated today that Ukraine and Russia are suffering equally from the war, and in general, both sides are equally to blame. The idea behind tomorrow's meeting seems clear: to hold parallel negotiations in Davos with Trump, Zelensky, and the Europeans, while in Moscow, Vitkov meets with Putin and, if necessary, even coordinate them remotely. At the same time, Trump managed to insult several European countries at once, claiming that without America, they are all just weaklings who could be crushed with a single blow. But, as I already said, most of the time Trump talked about Greenland. He said that he was only asking for a piece of ice, and that without America, the island would be taken over by the Russians and the Chinese. He made up a story about how the United States gave Greenland back to Denmark and said it was all foolish, so he wouldn't do it again now. But in the end, Trump said the most important thing, which immediately calmed the stock markets. Trump stated that he does not intend to use military force to seize Greenland, but that Europe should still give him the island. But later, he also claimed that there is supposedly some kind of preliminary agreement on Greenland. But Trump also admitted that the United States did in fact use some secret weapon in Venezuela during the capture of Nicolas Maduro, which suppressed all electronics and paralyzed the soldiers. Well, let's break down this entire crazy day in Davos in this episode. My name is Pechiy, let's discuss this topic together, but before we start, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, give a like and leave any comment under this episode. This really helps a lot in promoting the content on YouTube, and I would be grateful to you for that. Also, subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechiy News. The link is in the description of this video. There we publish breaking news as it comes in. So, Donald Trump, although on his second attempt, finally arrived in Davos and immediately caused a series of scandals and broke all sorts of protocols. For example, Trump started by saying that Europe is a very, very weak ally and America doesn't need allies like that. He says Europe has become troubled over the decades, with some places now unrecognizable. Next is his quote: "We can argue about this, but there are no arguments. Friends come back from different places. I don't want to offend anyone, but they say, I don't recognize Europe, and it's not in a positive sense, but in a very negative one. I love Europe and want it to succeed, but it's heading the wrong way. The reason lies in constantly growing government spending, uncontrolled mass migration, and endless foreign imports. Europe needs to abandon the culture it has built over the past 100 years. We don't need weak allies, we need strong allies." After that, Trump mocked the European leaders, but this deserves a separate episode altogether, so subscribe to this YouTube channel so you don't miss it. I will definitely talk about it. And although Trump devoted most of his speech to Greenland, he still managed to lash out with criticism at the presidents of Ukraine and Russia. Trump stated he would meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky soon, but sources say the meeting is still ongoing and set for January 22. Trump stated that it is finally time to reach a peace agreement. And now I will quote the words of Donald Trump himself. He insists that it is Europe, quote, that wants us to help them with Ukraine, and I'll tell you we will help, but I'm not even helping them. I want people to stop dying. Well, you know, that's an interesting interpretation, because before Trump insisted that only he could stop the war because he gets along well with Vladimir Putin, and now he says he's just helping Europe. Well, whatever. And now I'll give you a key quote from Trump on this topic. Quote, "I think Putin wants a deal. I think Zelensky wants a deal. I'm meeting with him today. He might be present in this room." That was strange. It sounded strange because Zelensky wasn't in the room. He remained in Kiev after yesterday's major Russian strike on the energy sector, which left 60% of the city without power for a second day and 33% without heating. The Trump-Zelensky meeting is set for tomorrow afternoon, January 22 in Davos, before Vitkov and Kushner meet Putin in Moscow. I'll continue Trump's quote. We are helping NATO with Ukraine. If not for us, Putin would have finished everything, and if Kamala or Joe were elected, there would be a third world war. I think we're approaching a moment when Putin and Zelensky can get together and make a deal. And if not, they're stupid. That goes for both of them. Well, I know they're not stupid, but if they don't do it, they're stupid. I don't want to offend anyone, but we have to make a deal. Too many people are dying. And this is where it gets really interesting. On January 22, Donald Trump, Volodymyr Zelensky, and European leaders will meet. Trump has developed his own negotiation strategy. Let me explain now. Today, Trump refused to participate in the G7 summit, which French President Emmanuel Macron suggested holding this week in Paris. Macron suggested inviting both Russian and Ukrainian representatives to the meeting at the same time. Well, since the G7 summits are attended by the heads of state and government of the member countries, this initiative de facto meant inviting Vladimir Putin to the meeting. Macron says, let's finally bring together Putin, Zelensky, the European leaders, and Donald Trump, and finally sit down and talk. But Trump said that there would be no meeting in that format, but something else would happen. Trump's team plans simultaneous meetings. Trump, Zelensky, and European leaders in Davos, and Putin with Trump's envoys Vitkov and Kushner in Moscow. The last two are already heading to Moscow. So the idea is simple. To hold so-called parallel coordinated negotiations, since Vitkov already stated today that Putin supposedly agrees to a 20-point peace plan, but with some reservations that should be discussed in the format I described above. So, most likely these negotiations will be held in Davos and at the same time in Moscow, and they can, let's say, coordinate all of this synchronously by phone. Honestly, I wouldn't expect anything groundbreaking from these negotiations, and that's why on the sidelines of the summit in Davos, Stephen Vitkov was asked, quote, "We see that Russia continues to attack Ukraine's energy infrastructure, leaving millions of Ukrainians without electricity and heating. Do you think Putin is really interested in a peace deal?" And here's what Stephen Vitkov answered. I'll just quote his words verbatim, without any comments, quote, "Well, first of all, they're at war, so they're shooting at each other, and we don't tolerate that. We regret this. That's why we're all working so hard for peace. People are suffering on both sides. It's cold there, and it's terrible when you don't have heating. We need to fix everything, and a peace deal will do that." Well, here we move on to the second part of this episode and the second topic of Trump's speech in Greenland. Trump likely didn't spend so much time talking to Vladimir Putin for no reason. Apparently, that's where he learned to justify territorial seizures with pseudo-historical excursions. According to Trump, he doesn't plan to use military force to seize Greenland, but it should still belong to the United States of America. A little later, Trump stated that there was supposedly already some preliminary agreement about what to do with Greenland. Therefore, he still won't impose the promised tariffs against 8 European countries, which was supposed to take effect from February 1. He says for now there isn't any agreement, but I'll quote Trump. "We want a piece of ice to protect the world, but they won't let us secure it. We never asked for anything else. We could have kept that piece of land for ourselves after World War II, but we didn't. So they have a choice. You can say yes to us, and we will be very grateful to you for that, or you can say no, and we will remember it. Negotiations should begin immediately on the United States acquiring Greenland. Only the United States can protect this giant piece of ice, this almost uninhabited and undeveloped territory located in a key strategic position between the United States, Russia, and China. But what's the main point here? After a number of Republicans spoke out against Trump's idea to seize the island, Trump himself said that he does not want to and will not use force to acquire Greenland, meaning military force. He also hinted at a connection between the agreements on Ukraine and Greenland. After talking about the benefits of a potential peace alliance for Ukraine, he repeated, quote, "But now I'm just asking for a piece of ice." But there were also some strange statements from the American president. Trump drew a direct parallel with Europe's colonial past, stating that the United States should be able to act the same way Europe once did. Because in his view, without seizing territories, there is no wealth, quote. "We have acquired many other territories throughout our history, just like many European countries. They acquired many of them. Some had enormous wealth, vast lands all over the world. Yes, Trump is basically suggesting a return to the colonial era. And then what? Trump complained that during World War II the United States protected Greenland but then ended up with nothing afterwards. Another quote, "After World War II we gave Greenland back to Denmark. How foolish we were to do that, but we did it. But how ungrateful." And, as I wrote today on my Telegram channel, what does gave back even mean? Did Greenland ever actually belong to the United States, or was it occupied by Americans? Yes, indeed. In 1941, the Americans took over the defense of the island under an agreement with the Danish ambassador to the United States. After the war, they offered Denmark $100 million for the island, but Denmark declined. In 1951, Denmark and the United States signed an agreement letting the Americans station troops on the island with almost no restrictions. If you dig even deeper, as Trump likes to do now, as Putin used to like to do before then. In the 10th century, Scandinavian settlements appeared in Greenland, and 300 years later, this territory was incorporated into the Kingdom of Norway. In the early 19th century, the island came under Danish control. Previously, Denmark and Norway governed it together. In the year, Greenland was officially incorporated into Denmark and ceased to be a colony, then gained autonomy, and so on. So, in this whole story, a simple question arises. What does it mean that the United States returned Greenland to Denmark? And one more thing, Trump says that the United States was left with nothing in Greenland. Well, whose fault is that? The fact is that the agreement signed with Denmark in 1951 allows the United States of America to use the territory of Greenland for defense purposes without any restrictions. In fact, there are practically no restrictions at all. But during the Cold War, the United States itself closed more than a dozen of its military bases in Greenland. Denmark wasn't responsible. The United States left on their own. One more interesting point. During his speech, Trump repeatedly called Greenland Iceland. It's interesting that when Joe Biden mixed up the names of countries, Trump himself said that it was a sign of declining mental abilities. Trump now says it's not Greenland but Iceland. He also claimed he made peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan. He repeated it again. Yes, but let me quote Trump about Greenland. "All the Europeans loved me until a few days ago when I told them about Iceland. I mean Greenland. They used to call me Daddy." The problem with NATO is that we will definitely be there for NATO 100% if needed, but will they be there for us when we need them? If I call them and say, "Gentlemen, some country has attacked us," will they be with us? They're not even with us when it comes to Iceland. Yesterday, the stock market dropped because of Iceland, so Iceland has already cost us a lot of money, but that's nothing compared to how much the market has grown. That's the kind of speech an ally gives. Trump burst into Davos, yelled at the allies, and left. Oh, right, the forum is taking place in Switzerland, and here's one more quote from Donald Trump for you. "Without us, Switzerland isn't Switzerland." I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do this by making any donation or paid subscription using the links and details in the description of this video, as well as by using the QR code on your screens. I will be grateful for any support from you. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.